Fawn, the fourth trauma response we don't talk about. When our brains perceive a threat in our environment, we automatically go into one of these stress responses: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. From an evolutionary standpoint, these responses have served us well by allowing us to respond quickly to threats and get to safety and survive. But for folks who have lived through prolonged exposure to abuse or trauma, often referred to as complex trauma, the threat never feels like it went away, leaving many individuals stuck in different stress response modes. There are classic examples of fight, flight, or freeze due to trauma, but did you know there's actually a fourth response? It's called Fawn and is a term coined by Pete Walker, a C-PTSD survivor and licensed marriage and family therapist who specializes in helping adults who were traumatized in childhood. Fawn types seek safety by merging with the wishes, needs, and demands of others. They act as if they unconsciously believe that the price of admission to any relationship is the forfeiture of all their needs, rights, preferences, and boundaries. And what will you do when you join a cult? You do exactly that. You are merging with the wishes, needs, and demands of the cult leader. When children don't want to add stress to the family, they assume the role of good kid or the quiet kid to gain acceptance and approval. I sure did that. It's natural. You go into shutdown and silence. That way you cease to exist and become invisible. As adults, they continue to seek approval by pleasing others and performing positivity. This survival strategy is called fawning. The four ways we respond to danger are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. When a person experiences childhood trauma, particularly ongoing or repeated traumas, their danger response can become dysfunctional. They can become too sensitive to danger, meaning that things that are not actually dangers are responded to as dangerous. They can shift into a danger response too frequently and too easily. It can become their default response. It can take them significantly longer to shift back to a no-danger resting state. They can become more comfortable or stuck in a danger response. Being on alert and on guard can feel safer and more normal than being relaxed or calm. Fawn. What is it? The fawn response is all about making the danger go away, doing whatever it takes to make the situation safer. What's happening in your body? I can't find any research explaining what's happening in the body. This danger response is still controversial and understudied. My guess is that it's somewhere between the freeze response and the flight response, an alertness to the situation and what it may take to fix it, but also a gentling, calming posture. Common immediate behavioral response: placating, submissive, non-threatening, appeasing behaviors, meant to diffuse the situation, apologizing or accepting blame, even when not your fault, using humor to lighten the mood. As a toddler, she learns quickly that protesting abuse leads to even more frightening parental retaliation, and so she relinquishes the fight response, deleting no from her vocabulary and never developing the language skills of healthy assertiveness. Sadly, many abusive parents reserve their most harsh punishments for talking back and hence ruthlessly extinguish the fight response in the child. And cult leaders do just the same. You are not allowed to criticize, you are not allowed to question, you are not allowed to have needs. The abused toddler often also learns early on that her natural flight response exacerbates the danger she initially tries to flee. I'll teach you to run away from me. And later that ultimate flight response, running away from home, is hopelessly impractical and of course even more danger-laden. Many toddlers at some point transmute the flight urge into the running around in circles of hyperactivity. And this adaptation works on some level to help them escape from uncontainable fear. This then is often the progenitor for the later OCD-like adaptations of workaholism, busyholism, spendaholism, sex and love compulsivity, and other process addictions. The toddler that bypasses this adaptation of the flight defense may drift into developing the freeze response and become the lost child, escaping his fear by slipping more and more deeply into dissociation, letting it all go in one ear and out the other. It is not uncommon for this type to eventually devolve into the numbing substance addictions of pot, alcohol, opiates, and other downers. A final scenario describes the incipient codependent toddler who largely bypasses the fight, flight, and freeze responses and instead learns to fawn her way into the relative safety of becoming helpful. And this is what cult leaders also want you to be. Be selfless, be serving, be kind. Have no needs of your own. She may be one of the gifted children of Alice Miller's drama of The Gifted Child. This is a great, great book. It really helped me understand myself. I read that at least 3 times. The gifted child who discovers that a modicum of safety, the ultimate aim of all 4 of the 4 F responses, can be purchased by becoming useful to the parent, servitude, ingratiation, and forfeiture of any needs that might inconvenience and either the parent become the most important survival strategies available. Boundaries of every kind are surrendered to mollify the parent. And this is what you will do in a cult environment. You will do exactly that. Just continuing what you learned as a toddler. All this loss of self begins before the child has many words, and certainly no insight. For the nascent codependent, all hints of danger soon immediately trigger servile behaviors and abdication of rights and needs. These response patterns are so deeply set in the psyche that as adults many codependents automatically and symbolically respond to threat, like dogs rolling over on their backs, wagging their tails, hoping for a little mercy and an occasional scrap. When you leave the cult, you will have difficulty standing up for yourself and knowing your rights, because you were programmed to obey without questioning, which is called fawning. This is a trauma response. And this is a programmed behavior that is very difficult to shake off. And it took me years to get where I am. There was no trouble as long as you obeyed. You completely ignored your own needs. You just followed the dogma. It was first coined by Pete Walker, who wrote about this mechanism pretty brilliantly in his book Complex PTSD, From Surviving to Thriving. Fawn types seek safety by merging with the wishes, needs, and demands of others, or the cult leader. They act as if they unconsciously believe that the price of admission to any relationship is the forfeiture of all their needs, rights, preferences, and boundaries. The cult leader programs you to obey his every word. So if you exit the cult, you might very well keep doing what you learned in the cult, same behavior, because that made you feel safe. You didn't get into trouble. So it is really difficult to learn to actually stand up for yourself and have your needs met and speak up. You will feel guilty or even ashamed, and you might dissociate when somebody asks you what you need or what you want. Then you just draw a blank, because this is stressful. It causes anxiety. So there is a lot of deprogramming to do in this area. Am I deeply respecting the humanity of the person in front of me? And am I seen and held in my humanity too? Am I speaking from the heart? Am I being authentic? Or am I giving apologies that I don't mean, or appeasing somebody else for the sake of it? Am I taking responsibility for how I'm showing up, while not burdening myself with shit that isn't mine to hold? I believe that a lot of people who fawn have had to shut down their emotional realities to some extent, because we learn that the only emotions that matter for our survival are the emotions of those around us. By the time I entered treatment, my therapist remarked that I was so concerned about everybody else, I'd forgotten how to care about myself. And she was right. I moved through my life having internalized the idea that I didn't matter at all. A big part of my healing has been getting back in touch with my emotions, needs, desires, and personal boundaries, and learning to name them. This has meant releasing old coping mechanisms that allowed me to numb out. And I've also had to practice naming not just what I think in any given moment, but giving a voice to what I feel, whether it seems rational or not. It will definitely take you some time to get there, because the problem in joining a cult and following the cult leader's very command is that your seeking system has been completely turned off. What is the seeking system? Seeking is the basic impulse to search, investigate, and make sense of the environment. Understanding core emotions. In her book, Animals Make Us Human, Temple Grandin asked the question, what does an animal need to be happy? Grandin lists 5 freedoms animals should have in an intensive animal production situation. You can very much compare that to a cult for human beings. It's very intensive and your environment is completely controlled. Grandin says that to create optimum situations for animals, we have to start with the animal's emotions. These insights into animal behavior may help us illuminate some of the essential elements for our human behavior, both child and adult. When we experience physical or mental distress, certain core emotions are involved that create problem behaviors. We have to observe behavior and think about the emotion that is driving it and the need behind the emotion. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn are simply responses to stress because needs are not met. Needs are not met. Only the cult leader's needs are met. Your own are completely disregarded. Of course, this will cause a stress response after some time. Phrases used to convey a deep emotional understanding and experience with animals are not in most of our experiences. Madder than a wet hen. How many wet hens do we see nowadays? But once you have seen one, the expression takes on a distinct meaning and a deep understanding of a core emotion. The stories Grandin shares about these 7 core emotions involving pigs, cats, dogs, horses, chickens, and wildlife give us insight into how animals make us human. Living around animals and observing their behaviors provides insight into our emotions in a profound way and is at risk of being lost. Learn more about core emotions to better understand your dog, your children, and yourself. If we get emotions right, we'll have fewer problems, meaning we will not have any stress responses like fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Citing Dr. Jaak Panksepp's work, Grandin describes 7 blue ribbon emotions that animals have: seeking, rage, fear, panic, lust, care, and play. When referring to these emotions, the words are in all capitals to help with specific meaning. Seeking is the basic impulse to search, investigate, and make sense of the environment. The seeking system being turned on. Anticipatory eagerness, supporting curiosity and exploration, a feeling of eye-brightening interest. This anticipatory delight we experience, which makes us feel alive and kicking. This is what I call true happiness. What is not surprising, when the seeking system is turned on, it is in the midbrain area, which is rich in dopamine production. So that's why you feel so enthusiastic and alive when there is novelty. You feel like a lit up Christmas tree. For me, it's doing research or listen to audiobooks. So if that seeking system is turned off because your cult environment is so dogmatic and narrow, what will you lose? Dopamine. And many people will start to feel depressed, listless, no energy. So by now I am very lucky to have found good therapists and people who support me. I have now several places to go where I feel met in my needs, where I feel seen, where I feel heard. And this helps to heal all the trauma. And I hope that everybody has at least such a person in their life when they leave the cult. Reading that again. Basic impulse to search, investigate, and make sense of the environment. When you are in a cult, you are not allowed to seek new information, read about whatever you like, or study, have an education. So you might get bored out of your mind and your brain actually shuts down because there is no activity, no new impulses. This is a very, very basic need everybody has, not only animals, humans too. their seeking system needs to be activated. Rage gives a captured animal the huge burst of energy necessary to get a predator to loosen its grip and be able to then run away. You can understand that literally. If you don't have any rage, then you don't defend yourself. You don't run away. You just shut down. Frustration is a mild form of rage. When an animal feels trapped, rage takes over. And cult leaders, of course, always suppress anger. You are not allowed to get angry. That's a negative emotion. And so many cult survivors have a really hard time to show anger. They feel guilty and ashamed because of that programming. But it's a very natural reaction to a threat. Fear is an emotion that probably doesn't need a lot of explanation, but is in response to not feeling safe and feeling that one's survival is threatened. When your needs are not met, this can be very threatening. Panic refers to the social attachment system. When babies are separated from their mothers, this system kicks in and we hear distinctive separation cries from the babies. We are social animals, and of course, leaving the cult, leaving everything behind, this will also cause panic. Because you feel very alone, you don't feel safe. You don't know anybody outside of the cult because you have been so isolated. You have no job, no experience, no education. Of course you will panic. So that's why it is difficult to leave a cult. And that's why it is important that before you leave a cult, you have to prepare yourself. Take your time. Have everything as prepared as you can, so you don't fall into a pit when you exit. Have people that support you outside of the cult. Build a network. This is really, really important. Lust refers to sex and sexual desire. It is something natural for all of us. And very often in a cult, you are forced to be celibate. So you have to suppress lust. It's considered something dirty. So you probably will feel guilty or ashamed if you feel lust. But it is something very natural. And you have to just accept it. Care is about maternal caretaking and love. I think everybody naturally cares. However, this comes from a right hemisphere dominant approach. When you get into tunnel vision, this is left brain hemisphere centered survival mode. empathy and care goes out the window. And usually the cult leader is either a narcissist or psychopath, dark triad, so there will be no care for you or your needs. Play system produces feelings of joy and is associated with the spontaneous activity of the animal. It is natural to play, sometimes be silly, or laugh. And in a cult surrounding, very often those needs are suppressed. You are not allowed to play and fool around. You have to be perfect. You have to be pure. You have to behave. When we neglect to listen in order to understand behavior, needs and emotions, we block an opportunity to support the other person's self-awareness. And therefore, you need a therapist who listens deeply and empathically with a right hemisphere dominant approach in order to heal your trauma. Listening or understanding is called empathetic listening. There are many pitfalls to empathetic listening because one basic situation, the ego, might get in the way and block communication. So a therapist might see you just as the diagnosis, not as the human being. A therapist might just want to use techniques like a one-size-fits-all and be shut down for an individual approach. In communicating, too often we do all the talking and miss seeing from the other person's point of view. We miss the opportunity to understand the other person's behavior, needs, and emotions. Animals need to feel safe. Freedom from hunger and thirst. Freedom from discomfort. Freedom from pain, injury, or disease. Freedom to express normal behavior. Freedom to be yourself, not masking to please other people. Freedom from fear and distress.